There was a time when your baby was afraid of no one, or your hoard. You might remember it, those early weeks when you could pass your newborn to virtually anyone who walked through the door, and they would simply go. The neighbor who reached in for a hold. The aunt your baby had never met, pressing her face close and cooing. The stranger at the grocery store who leaned over the stroller with a smile. Photo. Your baby just looked back. Calm, open, completely unbothered. In those first months, your baby lived in a world without strangers. There were faces, some that appeared more often than others, some that brought warmth and milk and comfort, but all of them were received with a kind of open, unguarded curiosity. No one was unknown. No one was a threat. Every face was just another face in a continuous, undifferentiated world. And then, somewhere around month 6 or 7, that changes. It usually happens in a very specific way. Someone reaches toward your baby, a relative you love, an old friend visiting for the first time in months, and they extend their arms with nothing but warmth. And in that split second, before they've even made contact, your baby's face shifts. Not all at once. First, there's a stare, a long, assessing look that you haven't quite seen before. Not discomfort exactly, but evaluation. Koch. Then those eyes slide toward you, searching. And as the person moves closer, the little chin begins to tremble. The mouth pulls down at the corners. And then comes a cry that you recognize immediately as something new. Not hunger, not tiredness. This is fear. You might feel the urge to apologize to your guest. You might think, she was never like this before. Ori. You might wonder what changed, whether you did something wrong, whether something is wrong with your baby. But here is what you need to understand about that moment, that cry, that searching look toward you. It is not a sign that something has gone wrong. It is evidence of one of the most significant neurological leaps a human brain can make in its entire first year of life. To understand why stranger anxiety happens, you first have to understand what the brain needs to physically build before it can happen at all. And the first thing that needs to be built is the ability to truly recognize. In the first weeks after birth, your baby's brain processes human faces in a remarkably basic way. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, rough bilateral symmetry. That's enough to trigger the primary social reflex, the one that makes newborns orient toward faces from the very first hours of life. At this stage, in a very real sense, one face is much like any other face. But starting around months 2 and 3, something extraordinary begins to unfold. A region of the temporal cortex, specifically an area neuroscientists call the fusiform face area, begins to be refined through experience. Your baby's brain is no longer just registering face. It is starting to store individual faces as distinct neural maps. Your face, your partner's face, the face of whoever shows up most reliably in your baby's world. Every time you make eye contact with your baby, every time you respond to a cry, every time your face appears in their field of vision paired with warmth and feeding and comfort, your baby's brain is reinforcing those maps. You are not just teaching your baby to recognize you. You are, in the most literal physical sense, being built into the architecture of your child's brain. And here is where the story becomes genuinely remarkable. When that facial memory reaches a certain threshold, typically around months 5 to 6, your baby's brain can do something it has never done before. Compare. Not just recognize the familiar, but detect the unfamiliar. The brain now has enough reference data to notice. This face does not match any map I have built. That is the milestone. Not that your baby has become shy. Not that your baby has developed anxiety in any clinical sense, but that your baby's brain has finally accumulated enough stored experience. to notice when something falls outside of it. But recognition alone doesn't explain the crying. For the tears, for the fear response, one more piece needs to fall into place. Areon, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection and emotional processing center, is also maturing during this exact window. And here is the critical detail. The amygdala doesn't operate alone. In the mature brain, it works in constant dialogue with the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for emotional regulation and reasoned assessment. In adults, that dialogue is what lets you think, yes, this person seems unfamiliar, but I'm in a safe place, and there's no reason to be alarmed. But in a 6-month-old, the connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are still extraordinarily underdeveloped, which means when your baby's amygdala fires a signal, Iwaduan, unfamiliar face, potential threat, there is no regulatory system mature enough to modulate that signal in real time. Emotion travels directly from perception to expression. No filtering, no reassessment. Pure, unmediated, completely honest feeling. Jean Piaget described this developmental window as a foundational shift. So Pouduain, in how infants construct their understanding of reality, the beginning of the transition toward object and person permanence. Yoked, your baby is moving from a world of undifferentiated present experience, toward a world with categories, known and unknown, safe and uncertain. Stranger anxiety is the first visible proof that those categories are being built. But what's truly profound here goes beyond the act of recognizing a stranger. What stranger anxiety reveals is the depth of the map your baby has already built of you. When your baby cries in front of someone unfamiliar and turns to look for you, that is not a behavior that needs to be corrected or grown out of quickly. So certain, that is the attachment system working exactly as designed. John Bowlby, whose work on attachment theory remains foundational in developmental psychology, described the primary caregiver as a secure base, an anchor from which a child can explore the world, and a safe harbor to return to when something feels threatening. Stranger anxiety is the moment that secure base gets activated. In a way, you can actually observe for the first time. Your baby isn't just recognizing a stranger. Your baby is demonstrating that they know who you are. That in the entire universe of human faces, the brain has been mapping since birth. Yours occupies a position that is singular, irreplaceable, and safe. And this ripples outward in ways you might not expect. After this milestone, you may notice your baby tracking you differently, not just looking when you're present, but actively searching when you leave the room. This is the early seed of what researchers call separation anxiety, a milestone that will fully emerge around 9 to 12 months. But its roots are planted right here, in this moment, when your baby first truly understands that you are a distinct entity who can be present or absent. At the same time, you might notice your baby referencing your face more than they used to. When there's an unfamiliar sound, they look at you. When someone new approaches, they look at you first, then at the stranger. Developmental researchers call this social referencing. Your baby is using your emotional response as information to interpret the world. Your face has become your baby's first emotional compass. Think about what that means. A baby not yet 1-year-old has learned that other people's emotions carry information about safety. This is the earliest scaffolding of empathy. The first foundation of emotional intelligence. All of it growing from that searching look, the one that in the moment feels like fear, but is actually something closer to wisdom. Now there is something important we need to address, and that is the fact that none of this follows a fixed schedule. The typical window for stranger anxiety is roughly 6 to 8 months. But the normal range is considerably wider than that. Some babies show the first signs as early as 5 months. Others don't display it clearly until 9, 10, or even 12 months. And the intensity, how strongly a baby reacts, varies enormously from child to child. Some babies experience stranger anxiety as a brief, furrowed brow pause that passes in seconds. Others cry so intensely that everyone in the room feels the need to do something. Both are completely within the range of typical development. Why such a wide range? Part of the answer lies in temperament, the inborn neurological tendencies a child arrives with. Research by developmental psychologist Jerome Kagan on what he called behavioral inhibition showed that roughly 15 to 20% of children are born with a lower activation threshold in the amygdala. They respond more strongly and more quickly to anything novel or unfamiliar. This is not a problem to be corrected. It is a form of neurological diversity that has existed throughout human evolutionary history, and it comes with its own particular strengths. Part of the answer also lies in early social environment. Babies who have been regularly exposed to a wide variety of faces from early on, in large extended families, in group childcare, tend to develop broader facial recognition networks and often show less intense stranger reactions. Not because they are braver, but simply because their brains have had more reference data to work with. More faces in the library means fewer faces get classified as truly unfamiliar. This is not a prescription for what you should do differently. There is no exposure schedule to follow, no training protocol needed. Your baby's brain is doing exactly what it needs to do, at exactly the pace it needs to do it. And if your baby is past 12 months and you have never seen a clear stranger anxiety response, that is also not automatically a cause for concern. Some babies simply have higher novelty thresholds, or their social environment has been rich enough that few people register as strangers. If you ever have specific questions about your child's development, your pediatrician is always the right person to speak with, not because something is likely wrong, but because you deserve someone who can see your child whole. The next time your baby clings to you, when a well-meaning relative reaches out, in that moment when you're rushing to pick them up and mouthing an apology across the room, pause for just a second. Look at your baby's face. You are looking at evidence of memory being formed, of a neural map that has been built through thousands of small moments. Every feeding, every response to a cry, every time your face appeared in your baby's field of vision, carrying safety with it. Those moments didn't disappear. They were written into the physical structure of your child's brain. When your baby cries and reaches for you, they are not simply saying that person scares me. They are saying something far more profound. I know who you are. In all of this world, I know that you are where safe is. You are not just watching your baby be afraid of a stranger. You are watching the first visible, observable proof that love has taken root in your child's nervous system. That attachment is working exactly as 200,000 years of human evolution designed it to work. That's not a setback. That is your baby becoming. Tonight, watch where your baby looks when something unexpected happens. When there's an unfamiliar sound, when someone new walks into the room, when something makes them uncertain. Notice where their eyes go first. Now you know what you're actually seeing. You're watching your child's first emotional compass, and it's pointing straight at you.